So this stag should give you a little clue that we're not in London, we're in Edinburgh, and I'm very proud to introduce you to Rod and Kris from Post Electric Studios.
Hey.
How long have you been here?
About 8 months, I think.
So it's a new enterprise.
Yep.
Yes.
And I hear you've got lots of lovely toys. So let's go and have a look. Oh, awesome. Now, hang on, before we walk past, what on earth is that?
I think made by Western Television originally. It's a US Army 1950s valve compressor, military grade, 8U for one channel.
500,000 tubes.
Yeah,
Really?
It's
Fantastic.
fairly crazy. Destroys everything. Basically.
Now, you're in a band, Rod, called Idlewild.
Yeah.
So you have, I've just spotted the corner of my eye, some amazing guitars.
There's 1 or 2 of them here, yeah. We've been collecting for 20 odd years on the road. Some of them look like they've been on the road for 20 years.
Right. And current favourites?
And this Harmony Rocket, which I bought in Brooklyn last year. Just a lovely kind of jazz-toned arch top. Fairly temperamental, but you know, I think they were catalogue guitars to start with, Harmony, much like the Silvertone.
Right.
And then branched out. They're starting to pick up a name for themselves a little bit now.
Vastly expensive?
No, I picked up for a few $100s, but
wow.
I think they go for something around, you know, under $1,000 here, I think. But yeah, it's lovely. It's very, very warm but short kind of jazz tone guitar. It's something I didn't have, so I thought I'd better get one.
Brilliant. And I see that we've got some more over here.
Yeah, 1 or 2.
I'm fascinated by this. Is a very
This
dour but elegant looking.
is sort of a Calvinist approach to acoustic guitars, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a parlour made by a company called Farida, a British company who'd got in touch. I believe they were around in the 90s as well, but more recently they've started up again, and had got in touch with me and said that I want to try a couple of their guitars, and they kindly sent me a couple. And this is the one that caught my eye. You can put pretty much anything in front of it, and it sounds good.
Jaguars are absolute beasts, aren't they?
It's one of my favourites. It's a 64. It's taken a bit of a beating. To be fair, it had been a bit beaten when I got it. It's had a few modifications done, but I've carefully kept all of the old original parts to put back in it if I ever need to. But I just changed the bridge on it because the bridges on the old Jaguars are fairly useless.
Right. Yes.
So put a rolling Tune-o-matic on it. And a stacked humbucker in at the bottom just to boost the level a bit. But it's a fantastic sounding guitar. Records. I use it more for recording than touring. Since I found out when I got it insured last time, I thought that's not going to tour anymore.
No, they're not cheap, are they?
No.
And you're a big Vox fan?
Yeah, big fan of Vox. I've been using them since the mid-90s, and they were very kind to give me a couple of AC30s, one top boost and one, I can't remember what you call the non-top boost ones, just the standard one, I guess.
Gotcha.
With the greenback speakers, they sound fantastic. They're a really true reissue of the originals. Super reliable, really great tone.
And for both live and recording?
Live and recording, yeah. I mean, the top boost is very clean. The standard is, you can really push it hard. And I've a little attenuator built by a local guy called Dennis Marshall from Dunfermline, who built essentially like a power brake for it with a treble shift plate, which pushes more treble in as you attenuate down. He's built it specifically for that AC30 so that he thinks it sonically adjusts correctly, which means you can really push it, you know, even in a live situation if you so desire, without taking everyone's head off.
Which you do nonetheless.
Which I do nonetheless, because the other 2 amps are still loud.
And do you have a preferred standard setup mic that you would stick in front of them?
Yeah, for the Vox I use an RE20 and a 57 blended together.
RE20, is that a ribbon?
No.
No.
RE20s are used as a broadcast mic mainly for large dynamic range, basically picking up nice sort of low end in the voice for spoken word, but used as a lot as a kick mic, I think, in great on bass amp, but it's good all rounder. In fact, I used it on vocals on a session that we were to tape last week, just because he wanted he had a very deep voice, but he didn't want too much sparkle. And it
Gotcha.
just worked perfectly, but very good all rounder, that mic actually, and they look kind of cool as well.
Yes,
a
they
bit
do.
like a sort of a.
They have a weird name in German, actually.
Oh, do they?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
They're called Elefantenpimmel. I'm not going to translate.
I know exactly what that means.
Brilliant. Well, these guitars are luring us in. So should we go through to the live room? What an awesome space. And I imagine the amps sound great in here as well.
They do, yeah. Although actually, I quite like recording them in the corridor of late.
Okay.
I quite like recording amps. Certainly for heavier music, I tend to record them very dry.
Okay.
Actually, having used an amp booth once through necessity, and then finding it really easy to place them in the mix afterwards. I tend to record, especially for tracking live with a band. I tend to put them in the corridor and baffle. And get them as dead as possible, actually.
Right.
When we're obviously recording something nice and clean and open, yeah, they sound fantastic in here. Really opens out nicely, this room.
Now, something is missing. I have a theory that above a certain latitude, all recording studios have harmoniums in them. You see? I don't know what that latitude is, but I'm aware that we're above it.
Above Birmingham.
Above Birmingham, you think? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Yeah. I think this one came from Mull originally, this old one here. This is an old Italian accordion, which is slightly broken. But this old harmonium, I think, came down from Mull.
And the further north you go, the more harmoniums you get. I mean, in Iceland, you can't move in live rooms for harmoniums.
It's a bizarrely in tune one, actually. It's almost at perfect concert, which usually harmoniums tend to be a little bit flat, I've found. But it's almost too in pitch, actually. It sometimes doesn't sound the normal harmonium way of just a bit under the note, so we sometimes have to pitch it down afterwards.
We found that they're not actually the easiest things to record, actually.
This one records really well. You get a few clunks and clonks,
right,
obviously, but it's quite, the pump is quite quiet on this one, but the keys are a little bit noisy, but yeah, I mean, that's part of the charm.
Brilliant stuff. And you've got all your mics laid out for convenience.
Most of them, yeah.
And now I've just bought a Flea C12, which I've yet to kind of test, but I bought it on the recommendation of another studio, and they really swear by Flea.
They're fantastic. I mean, they've been a bit of a revelation. They're very open, really well built. I mean, they're fantastic. I've heard very good things about the C12.
And so these are the M50?
They're the M50s,
right.
Yeah.
Any other kind of mics of interest you want to...
The Brauner is, or Browner or Brauner, however, it's a go-to for vocal.
Where's that one?
The BM1
valve.
Ooh. Can I pick it up?
It's fantastic.
It's a bit what we more or less replaced the U87 with,
yeah,
which I still like using, but it's like, I think it wins 8 times out of 10 over the U87
really
as a general vocal mic for us for some reason. Unexpectedly.
Yeah. The U87 I find is an interesting thing for me, because I think it's like with these video cameras that give you a very neutral image that you then have to grade.
Yeah.
I think 87s, you have to work with them.
I think it's a total room dependency. Like whenever I use it in a small and boxy room, it really doesn't work. Like while other microphones work way better, in this room it shines. It's really it was the first time where I was like, okay, I'm going to keep it. I'm not going to sell it. Right. And here it's really like I use it on something and it's nice. It's actually a nice mic. But I always had trouble when we were still kind of floating about and trying to set ourselves up in less than perfect spaces, and I never really got out of it what I was expecting, because it's obviously, like, when you start out, it's quite an expensive microphone nonetheless.
Isn't it? Absolutely. And you have a very attractive piano. What's this?
It's a Bluthner Baby Grand from 1908. We just found out the age.
And it's interesting because the top strings, there's more.
Yeah, it's got a resonator string. The piano tuner explained this to me last week. Has a resonator string on the top half to make it essentially sound bigger. Right. It makes it harder to tune.
Yeah, I bet
the
it
maintenance
does.
a lot harder. But it sounds fantastic. It records very, very well. You can make it sound fairly posh and big, you know, the classic sort of German posh piano,
right,
which is not my favourite thing to do, but you can get a very vibey sound out of it as well. I mean, my favourite thing to do is to actually rest a 57 right on here, and you just pick up the frame vibration, and you get a really cool image of
I'd love to hear that. That
really
sounds
cool
like a
image.
lovely
You get a
idea.
lot of clunks and clonks, obviously,
We love
as
a bit
well.
of clunkiness.
Yeah. If you filter out the real lows, you tend to get a really cool. It compresses very well as well. You get this really very transient smooth.
And that's the only mic, or do you have a couple of stereos?
That's always if we're doing something weird, but I usually just stereo. Quite often just XY and on this piano with the 451s.
451s.
Yeah.
Mono works well as well from underneath,
Yeah.
like a mono mic. I used the U87, or rather not me, but a producer who was in here used the U87 from underneath, and was just like, oh, this is quite a spectacular one mic sound for a piano, which I wasn't expecting.
It's very even. I think that's
Yeah.
the thing. I think that's the resonator strings do it. It evens, it balances it out across the board. But yeah, it's in remarkably good nick for its age. And we have it tuned every few months just to keep it on.
Excellent. So we've been teasing you long enough. It's time for the money shot. Right, let's have a look at the control room, which I hear is spectacular. Whoa. Amazing. I'm taking this all in. A spectacular amount of outboard. How brilliant.
There's a few toys.
And they're all on, which is a good sign.
They're all
as
on
opposed
and
to
they're
just
all
gathering
working.
dust.
Yeah, no, they're all on and being used. Just been mixing a sort of I don't know how you would describe it musically, fairly Susie and the Banshees meets Tool, I guess. But, slightly sort of gothy in a good way. So lots of H3000 and some non-Lin on the drums.
Oh, this is all just amazing stuff.
This
Dimension D,
Yeah,
I'm
which
a
is
proud
fantastic.
owner of one of those.
Fantastic
It's
stuff.
just the best stereoificator, isn't it?
It really is great.
It's it's a chorus that's just got 4 different settings.
Yeah,
And you
that's
have
it.
to- More and more and more.
Chorusy, chorusier, and more chorusier.
And what's this down at the bottom here?
This is a Federal 864, I think, isn't it? Yeah. It's again a tube compressor. It destroys everything.
Really, in a nice way.
Yes. It makes kick and snare
yeah.
exceptionally aggressive, but we're actually
Very
going to
full.
need. You have to attenuate at the back end, and
Yeah.
tend to use one of the 1176s just on
Okay.
on none, and and just roll off because it just boosts beyond belief. It is really aggressive.
Right.
But
That
and
sounds interesting.
it's sort of aggressive is the first setting, and then more aggressive.
More.
It's a bit of an on-off, and then on
More on.
plus or something.
Brilliant. And what's this here?
The boiler, it's Ridge Farm. They're fantastic. It's ultra compressor, smashes everything in its
Kind
path.
of good for bus.
Yeah, I use it for parallel drum, kick and snare, and then transient designer on the back end to get rid of the noise, and just get super punchy kick and snare out of it.
Which we nicked off Dave
It
Ehringer
was the Dave Ehringer trick.
a couple of weeks ago.
Really?
Who done a lot of the Idlewild early records, sort of mentored me as I was learning. And he came up to do a sort of masterclass here a couple of weeks ago, and that was a new trick that I learned off him, which for parallels, and it's fantastic. It's super punchy. I also like to use it. I used it out in King Size out in LA on a session. They had one on snare bottom. If you really push it and then tidy up with a transient designer, you get a very bit crushy,
Right.
kind of almost programmed sounding
I must look
fizz
into
out of
that.
it, which is great. They're really cool, actually. They're really nice bit of gear.
Fantastic. And so we've got. I'm just going to the stuff that I don't recognise.
The retro stay level's great. It's a Gates clone, essentially. Very clean and reliable and smooth. I really actually like it on piano. If I'm doing vibey, weird piano with a one mic, I like to smash it with it, actually, and gets rid of the transients. Can actually make it piano sound very Rhodes-ish very
Oh,
quickly.
really?
With just smooths everything off. But it's great on vocal.
So it kind of gets rid of the upper harmonics kind of thing. Yeah.
It's really cool. But it's very close to the original stay level. Everybody tells you, anyway.
Brilliant. Now, so you're using a solid state SSL duality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is not a desk that I'm that familiar with, and it looks very.
It's an analog console, basically. However, it also has a digital side to it which controls your DAW.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So you can flip between two modes, analog or digital mode, but you're always going through the analog circuitry.
Right.
It has a bit of a steep learning curve in
Yeah.
the beginning because it's literally unlike anything else out there other than SSL stuff, other than the newer SSL stuff. So until you figured everything out, it's a bit like, can we do this like the old school way? And no, you can't. But once you figured it out, it's so flexible. I think it's the most flexible desk I've ever worked on in my life.
Right. And do you actually use the controller for the in-the-box stuff as well?
I tend to use the DAW section of the desk when I'm mixing,
Right.
because you're writing, you're straight away recallable, which is great. It gives you that recallable in the box mixing to some extent. I mean, it's fully recallable as well.
Wow.
But that again is another learning curve in itself. But it's fantastic. I mean, when we're tracking, it's in analog mode all the time, and basically works as an inline console using your DAW to provide that functionality. So where you don't have a short fader, you have a D-pot, which is controlling a level to tape or to the DAW. And you can choose at any point where in that path, signal path coming to or fro, that you want to send to the band or where you want to take your buses from.
Right.
It's very, very flexible.
But it sounds very complicated.
It's complicated, but once there's a light bulb moment after
Yeah.
about the first 3 weeks.
Okay.
Once you
Turning
understand
your
it, it's
hair.
just
Okay.
it's just a really good desk,
Yeah.
I presume.
Yeah.
And what are you just using the desk as for the mic pre's as well?
No, we also have a few DAVs, the Broadhurst, which are very punchy.
Yeah. I've not heard of those.
The Cytex as well, which are basically Neotech, aren't they? I think, well,
Cytec are Neotech.
Yeah.
The ones from the Neotech consoles, and the DAVs are the Decca ones, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken.
Right.
They're very, very nice, very, very nice pre's, especially for the price, I think. Like you get this, well, I don't know the current price, but I think I bought it for about €1,000 back in Germany
Okay.
for four-channel pre, and it was by far the best I found for that kind of money.
That does sound really reasonable.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And last but by no means least, the amazing Studer. And
Yeah.
do you is it functioning? Do you
yeah,
use it?
fully functioning. We had it on this session this weekend. I'm tracking 6 songs in 2 days, all to tape, which was, I mean, surprisingly tight band. So
Right.
very good. But yeah, works perfectly, syncs in perfectly with the spaceship of a desk. It's fantastic. I mean, it's a different way of working completely.
So you're actually recording onto the tape. It's not just kind of going through the tape and then back off the.
No, I mean, well, obviously, the magnetisation process, I've been reading up on this recently, is limiting by about 10 dB as you're actually magnetising to tape. This is what all of these people like Roger May are building these tapes, and it's not really a tape simulator, it's a tape processor, essentially, I think he calls it, that is doing what tape does to audio. You can buy in these sort of rackable units now that I think even Neve are bringing one out now as well.
Right.
It's because it's obviously not just saturation, it's gluing everything and squashing everything by 10 dB almost as it's going in.
Interesting.
I think the Neve one now is a couple of magnets in a box, essentially. They're slightly more probably sophisticated than that, but it's using magnetisation.
It's Neve after all.
It's Neve, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that's essentially what it's doing. Is you're gluing everything and squashing everything together at the same time. So.
It's like a rendering, isn't it?
It's the same as analog film, I suppose, as well. You know, the difference of the saturation and the grade that you get from using analog film against digital film. It's almost, you don't really need to mix it at the back end, I suppose. It's doing a lot of your work for you.
Funny enough, I think it's the biggest difference, though, is still the workflow.
Yeah.
That you have the screen switched off, that all of a sudden you actually listen to stuff.
And enjoy it.
And it's not so much about like, oh, is this on the grid or is this not on the grid, or what do we have here?
Yeah.
And you can take that premise though and use that even when you aren't using tape, obviously, and it's something that I'm trying to do now, is think as if I'm recording to tape all the time, whether I am or whether I'm not. Not all bands have got the budget to record to tape, obviously, and sometimes with time frame you have to be going straight into Pro Tools, but it doesn't stop you from being able to think that way and to not look at the screen when you're tracking and just try and listen, turn around the other way. And it is a different way of thinking. You're trying to make sure you get it at the front end. And I think that's very much kind of our ethos here at the studio, is that we don't want to be another.
Make it right, perform it right.
Make it right, perform it right, and get it right, and make a record that sounds like a band playing.
Yeah.
You know, not a band that have been replaced.
What I have an issue with is the computerization of the process, and what I think we forget about is, people go, well, does the UAD version sound as good as the actual 33609? It's like, well, I don't have good enough ears to tell the difference, but I know how these things make me feel and how we interact with the equipment.
It's feeling the music as well, yeah, and you're feeling that you're part of it, and you're tactile, and you're involved in doing something and manipulating it rather than just moving a mouse around to some extent. And there is an element of that which certainly draws me into a mix more than it would.
And draws better work out of you, possibly.
For me, it certainly does. And, not everybody
You refuse to mix.
I refuse to mix in the box. I
Really?
just won't do it now. I just don't enjoy it, the way that I do when I'm able to get my hands on something.
Yeah.
But, that's not necessarily the case for everyone. But I find certainly with the main difference from the analog gear to even the best clones of it or the best plug-in versions of it is how far you can push them.
Yeah.
That I think that, yes, a lot of them do very good versions of 1176s, for example, but I think you can push the analog ones a lot further before they sound like you've gone wrong.
Right.
No,
that's a very good point. Absolutely.
There's a point where the digital noise, I suppose, or the digital processing takes over, which it doesn't when you're using the real thing. But you can. There are plenty of mix shootouts with guys mixing all analog with 20 1176s and a 96 channel G series against someone who's done it in a Mac Mini, and the guy with the Mac Mini's made the better mix. So it's, again, at the end of the day, it's about your ears, isn't it? And it's about your musicality and being part of the mix. And that mentality, I suppose, is something that we're trying to use in the recording process as well, as of just listening, enjoying, making sure that you're getting it right in the first place, so you're not having to then fix it, because then the minute you're having to fix it, the mix becomes less enjoyable as well. If you pull up a mix and all the instruments are well recorded and it sounds good, you can get involved in the song and enjoy yourself.
Well, I've seen kind of young people's younger engineers, and something I'm noticing a lot is channel strips with 20 plugins on, and it's like you don't have the ability to put 20 pieces of outboard on 60 tracks of
You could probably.
But I think that's an issue. And do you think, because you're not only a kind of producer and engineer yourself, but also because you're part of a band, that the reason you don't like In the Box is because I find it less sociable. As a composer who uses engineers a lot, there's nothing I find more antisocial than going, can we just turn that up? And they go, no, I have to do it here, and then just hearing a mouse clicking. I just find it infuriating, and I don't feel involved in the process.
No, I can see that, certainly. I mean, I stopped attending mixes a lot more the minute that they started going in the box, certainly.
Yeah.
When we were mixing the last Idlewild record, which myself and Kris recorded in Edinburgh, and Mull, we then took it out to Brooklyn and had John Agnello mix it. We wanted someone else to do something with it, and mixing in Fluxivity, which is not there unfortunately anymore.
What happened?
I think the guy just had enough and sold all of his
He
stuff.
had like the nicest collection of beer I've ever seen.
But it was an enjoyable process again, because you're right, you were sort of part of it. You could see what was happening. You're not like squinting to see what he's doing over his shoulder on the screen. You do feel part of it, and I think we probably both learned quite a lot from watching his approach to it as well. When you're going to sit in a room and watch someone looking at a screen, you're going to go out of your mind.
Which is what I do most of the time upstairs.
But you don't have someone sitting in on it all the time.
True.
I think for attended mixing, absolutely, it's a nightmare if you're doing it in the box. But and off-putting as well.
Part of this is the reason why we're getting a Raven for upstairs, because it's like at least a bit of action, and you have a bit of
tactile. It's very interesting. I think that having done these kind of all over the place, all around the world, what I'm noticing is we've been in the box for about 15 years, and I think people are coming out but just embracing the best of both worlds. And I think therein lies,
Yeah.
you know, it's how you feel, how you're interacting with your music and the people around you, not just what's the noise floor of this or the frequency response of that, and is that algorithm, does that match that? I think it's how it makes you feel. Would you have some recommendations on how people should approach coming into a recording studio for the first time?
I'm in the middle of writing a blog about this at the moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, rehearse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all.
I mean,
basically.
pre-production is, these days you don't have the luxury, or who does have the luxury of spending 3 months in the studio to reimagine everything that you're doing. Make sure that the kick and the bass are playing together, you know, make sure that you're tight, make sure that you're not rearranging the songs in the studio.
Unless you have the budget to do so.
Unless you have the budget to spend a month in the studio.
This is us returning back to what people did with studios in the 50s and the 60s
God.
and
Even
the
in
early
the 90s.
70s. Until suddenly, you know...
Beat detective.
no, I think of, you know, until, you know, Kate Bush started spending years and years on albums and using recording studios as a compositional tool. And I think that we're returning to an age where you've got to come in, put some mics and get it down.
Yeah, I think you do, and you know, you want all of the time that you can for experimenting with sounds and getting the record to sound as good as possible. So if you can play it right every time, then you're going to say, you know, you're going to have more time to do that.
And it's much more comfortable as well.
It
like
is.
when you come in and you know what you're playing, you're not so stressed out, so you're not so stiff.
You don't get the red light fever. You know that you can play it, you know, and that's. One thing we try to do here is to try and give it a bit of a homely feel. Just putting the band stuff, our stuff, our furniture in and lamps in and whatever it is, just to try and make it less of a, you know, sterile red light studio where, because it does, I've noticed over the years, even with our own band, you know, the records we made in rehearsal rooms where we built a studio around ourselves were often tighter and had better vibes than the ones we'd done in, you know, Air or Electric Audio or any other studio, because you didn't have that red light fever, you felt comfortable. And you were more open and you play better. You do, and I think that, you know, coming into a studio, for the first time, if we're a young band, you're right, it can be really intimidating, and I think that
you always take it out on the drummer.
Yeah, usually the drummer or the bass player. Yeah, but no, if they're prepared enough, then that at least those nerves are allayed a little bit. But I think you've just got to enjoy it. It's like, why else would you make music these days unless you enjoyed it? Because let's face it, it's the only reason you can't do it for. So, you know, going into a studio like this should be fun. It should be an exciting thing, you know. So just, I suppose, get yourself ready for it and make the most of it, you know, because it's not the opportunity that a lot of people get these days.
Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely brilliant to see all of these lovely toys and to talk to you about your philosophy, which I really do agree with massively.
Oh, thanks.
Good stuff, Rod.
Nice to meet you.
And Kris, thank you.
Thank you very much.